The moment my daughter-in-law smirked at me across the Christmas turkey and said, "Face it, Amelia, you're just a bitter old woman clinging to relevance in a world that's moved on without you," I knew she had just made the biggest mistake of her entitled life. She thought she was dealing with some helpless grandmother who would quietly take her abuse. She was about to discover that behind my holiday apron and homemade cookies was a woman who'd built an empire that could destroy her career before the Christmas lights came down. My name is Amelia Bolton, and I'm 58 years old. To most people, I look like exactly what my daughter-in-law thinks. I am a traditional wife and mother who spent her life taking care of family while the world passed her by. What she doesn't know, what she's never bothered to ask about, is that I spent 20 years dominating pharmaceutical sales before founding Bolton Medical Consulting, a firm that's become the most influential medical recruitment company in the Denver metropolitan area. My son Andrew is 32 and works as a software engineer for a tech startup downtown. He's a good man with a kind heart, but he's completely blind to his wife's toxic behavior. Andrew has always been a peacekeeper, the type who avoids conflict and assumes the best in everyone. It's a beautiful quality that's served him well in life, but it's also made him an easy target for manipulation. Charlie, my daughter-in-law, is 29 years old and works as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized healthcare company. She's been married to Andrew for 5 years, and in that time, she's made it abundantly clear that she views me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a family member to respect. Charlie is the type of woman who measures everyone's worth by their social media presence and considers anyone over 40 to be essentially irrelevant to modern society. My husband Frank is 61 and retired from running his construction company 3 years ago. He's the steady, supportive partner who's watched me build my career while raising our family, and he's also watched Charlie's behavior escalate over the years with growing concern. Frank has the patience of a saint, but even he has limits when it comes to disrespect in our own home. We have 2 grandchildren, Emma, who's 6, and Lucas, who's 4. They're the lights of our lives, and watching Charlie use them as weapons to control family dynamics has been one of the most painful aspects of this whole situation. She'll threaten to limit our access to the kids whenever she doesn't get her way, knowing exactly how to hit us where it hurts most. The extended family includes my sister Helen, 55, and her husband Paul, 57, along with their son Jake, who's 25 and works in hospital administration. They've all witnessed Charlie's behavior over the years, but like Andrew, they've mostly stayed quiet to avoid family drama. What makes Charlie's attitude particularly ironic is that she works in healthcare marketing and industry, where my company, Bolton Medical Consulting, has significant influence. Over the past 15 years, I've built relationships with executives, HR directors, and decision-makers at every major healthcare organization in Colorado. My recommendations can open doors that stay closed to others, and my professional opinions carry weight that can make or break someone's career trajectory. But Charlie sees none of this. To her, I'm just Andrew's annoying mother who insists on hosting traditional family gatherings and asking too many questions about their lives. She views my interest in family traditions as outdated interference, and my concern for my son's happiness as controlling manipulation. For 5 years, I've bitten my tongue, swallowed my pride, and tried to maintain family peace. I've endured snide comments about my cooking, eye rolls during my stories, and passive-aggressive remarks about how different my generation is. I've watched her dismiss my husband's accomplishments, minimize my career achievements, and treat our home like a burden she has to endure. But tonight, at Christmas dinner, surrounded by the family I love, she was about to cross a line that would change everything forever. Christmas has always been my favorite time of year, and our home in Cherry Hills Village reflects that passion. For 30 years, Frank and I have lived in the same 4-bedroom colonial, raising Andrew here and creating memories in every room. The house isn't a mansion, but it's substantial and comfortable, with a kitchen that's seen thousands of family meals and a living room that's hosted decades of holiday celebrations. This particular Christmas was shaping up to be especially meaningful. Emma had finally reached the age where she truly understood the magic of the season, and Lucas was old enough to participate in our family traditions without needing constant supervision. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, a 7-course dinner featuring all of Andrew's childhood favorites, handmade decorations throughout the house, and carefully selected gifts that reflected how much I cherished each family member. The problems with Charlie had been escalating all year, but I'd hoped that Christmas would bring out her better nature. I was wrong. The tension started the moment they walked through our front door on Christmas Eve. Charlie immediately began criticizing the temperature of the house, the placement of the Christmas tree, and the overwhelming amount of decorations I'd put up. "It's like a Christmas store exploded in here," she said to Andrew, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "Your mom really doesn't understand the concept of elegant restraint, does she?" Throughout Christmas Eve dinner, she made pointed comments about everything from the heavy traditional menu to the outdated family customs we'd maintained for decades. When Frank shared a fraying story about Andrew's childhood Christmas pageant performance, Charlie interrupted to say, "That's sweet. But maybe we could focus on the present instead of constantly rehashing the past." Christmas morning brought new challenges. Charlie had insisted that Emma and Lucas open their Santa gifts at their own house before coming to ours, effectively splitting the magic of Christmas morning and making it clear that our traditions were secondary to whatever new customs she preferred. When the children arrived carrying the expensive electronics and designer clothes that Charlie had chosen as gifts, she made sure to comment on how simple our handmade presents looked in comparison. "Kids today are so different from when Andrew was little," she said, watching Emma struggle to show enthusiasm for the dollhouse I'd spent weeks crafting by hand. "They're used to more sophisticated entertainment." But it was her treatment of Frank that really started to push me toward my breaking point. My husband had spent months building a custom toy chest for Lucas, hand-carved with trains and airplanes that reflected our grandson's interests. When Charlie saw it, she smiled tightly and said, "How rustic. I'm sure Lucas will outgrow it quickly, but it's thoughtful." The dismissive tone, the backhanded compliments, the constant stream of subtle insults disguised as observations, it was all building toward something explosive, and I could feel it coming. By Christmas afternoon, when the extended family arrived for dinner, the atmosphere in our house was strained, despite my best efforts to maintain holiday cheer. Helen and Paul picked up on the tension immediately, but like always, they stayed diplomatically quiet. Jake, bless his heart, tried to lighten the mood by engaging Charlie in conversation about her work, not knowing he was walking into a minefield. The dining room looked perfect, my grandmother's china gleaming under the chandelier, candles flickering warmly, the turkey, golden and surrounded by all the traditional sides that had been part of our family celebrations for generations. Everyone gathered around the table that had hosted so many joyful occasions, and I said grace with a grateful heart, still hoping that the spirit of Christmas might somehow salvage the day. I should have known better. Charlie had been building toward this moment all day, and she was about to deliver a performance that would expose her true character to everyone present, while giving me the justification I needed to finally stop protecting her from the consequences of her behavior. The explosion was coming, and this time, I was ready for it. Dinner started pleasantly enough, with Frank carving the turkey and everyone passing dishes around the table in the familiar rhythm of family meals. Emma and Lucas were excited about their Christmas haul, chattering about their new toys between bites of mashed potatoes. Helen was complimenting the cranberry sauce recipe I'd inherited from my mother, and Paul was asking Andrew about his latest project at work, but I could see Charlie growing more agitated with each passing minute. Every family story, every shared memory, every moment of genuine connection seemed to irritate her further. When Jake mentioned how much he'd always loved our Christmas traditions, Charlie's smile became increasingly forced. When Helen asked about my consulting business, and I briefly mentioned landing a major contract with Presbyterian, St. Joseph Hospital, Charlie rolled her eyes so dramatically that Paul actually noticed. The first real crack in her facade came when Emma asked me to tell the story of how Frank and I met. It's a sweet tale about a chance encounter at a coffee shop near the hospital where I was doing pharmaceutical training, and how Frank showed up there every day for 2 weeks hoping to see me again. As I was telling it, Charlie interrupted. That's lovely, Amelia, but maybe we could talk about something more current? Some of us are trying to live in the present instead of constantly dwelling on ancient history. Frank's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. Andrew looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Helen and Paul exchanged glances across the table. The tension escalated when Lucas knocked over his water glass, and I immediately jumped up to clean it while reassuring him that accidents happen. Charlie sighed loudly and said, "This is exactly why children need to learn consequences instead of being coddled every time they make a mess." "He's 4 years old," I said gently, still wiping up water. "Accidents are how children learn." "That's the problem with your generation," Charlie replied, her voice getting sharper. "You think protecting kids from every little disappointment is helping them, but you're actually making them weak." Andrew turned out okay despite being babied constantly, but that's not the parenting style we want for our children. The room went quiet. Andrew was staring at his plate, clearly uncomfortable with his wife's public criticism of his upbringing. Frank had stopped eating entirely and was watching Charlie with a look I recognized, the same one he got when contractors tried to cheat him on job sites. But Charlie wasn't finished. The wine had loosened her tongue, and 5 years of suppressed resentment were bubbling to the surface. "I mean, look at this whole dinner," she continued, gesturing around the table. "It's like stepping back in time 50 years. The same recipes, the same decorations, the same boring stories about the good old days. Don't you realize how exhausting it is to pretend this is all so wonderful and meaningful?" "Charlie," Andrew said quietly, "maybe we should." "No, Andrew. I'm tired of pretending. Your family lives in the past, and they expect everyone else to play along with their little nostalgia fantasy. Your mother acts like she's the queen of the family, but what has she actually accomplished? She sold pills for 20 years, and now she runs some little consulting business that probably survives on nepotism and small-town connections." Helen gasped audibly. Paul set down his fork. Jake looked like he wanted to crawl under the table, but Charlie was just getting started. She'd been holding this in for years, and now it was all coming out in a torrent of venom that would destroy any chance of family reconciliation. "Face it, Amelia," she said, leaning forward with a cruel smile. "You're just a bitter old woman clinging to relevance in a world that's moved on without you. Your outdated values, your suffocating traditions, your desperate need to control everything, it's pathetic. We don't need your advice, we don't need your opinions, and we certainly don't need to keep pretending that your little life lessons have any value in the real world." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children had stopped talking, sensing that something terrible had just happened. That's when I smiled, set down my napkin, and decided it was time for Charlie to learn exactly who she'd been disrespecting. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Charlie sat back in her chair with a satisfied smirk, clearly believing she'd finally put me in my place. Andrew looked mortified, staring at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Frank's knuckles were white where he gripped his fork, and Helen looked like she might cry from sheer shock at what she'd just witnessed. But I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity. For 5 years, I'd made excuses for Charlie's behavior, told myself she was young and would mature, convinced myself that family peace was worth swallowing my pride. In that moment, watching her smile smugly while my grandchildren sat confused and my husband struggled to contain his anger, I realized I'd been enabling her cruelty by refusing to show her who she was really dealing with. "Charlie," I said calmly, my voice steady, despite the rage building inside me, "I think you've said enough for one evening." "Oh, have I?" she laughed, the wine making her bolder. "I'm just getting started, actually. Someone needs to tell you the truth about how the world sees you, and clearly Andrew doesn't have the backbone to do it." That was the moment I made my decision. I stood up slowly, walked to the antique sideboard where I keep important papers, and pulled out my phone. Charlie watched me with amused curiosity, probably thinking I was retreating to sulk somewhere private. Instead, I returned to the table and opened my contacts list. Charlie, you mentioned my little consulting business that probably survives on nepotism and small-town connections. I think there's something you should understand about those connections. I scrolled through my phone, letting her see the names. Dr. Patricia Williams, Chief Medical Officer at Denver Health. We've been friends for 15 years. Margaret Chen, VP of Human Resources at Presbyterian, St. Joseph. She's godmother to my nephew Jake. Robert Martinez, Director of Operations at National Jewish Health. We play golf twice a month. Charlie's smirk was starting to fade as recognition dawned. These weren't just random names, these were executives at major healthcare organizations throughout Colorado, including several that her own company worked with regularly. Then there's Amanda Foster, Regional Director for Health One, and Dr. James Thompson, who heads the entire physician recruitment division at UC Health. Oh, and Susan Bradford, she runs talent acquisition for the entire Kaiser Permanente Colorado region. I set the phone down and looked directly at Charlie, whose face had gone completely pale. You see, when you build genuine relationships over 30 years based on mutual respect and professional excellence, you develop what we call a network. These aren't just business contacts, they're friends who trust my judgment and value my recommendations. The room was silent except for the ticking of our grandfather clock. Andrew was staring at me like I'd just revealed I was a secret agent. Now, Charlie, since you work in healthcare marketing, I'm sure you understand how small this industry really is. How word travels quickly about people who are difficult to work with, unprofessional, or create toxic environments for their colleagues. Charlie's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I've spent my entire career building a reputation for integrity, discretion, and good judgment. When I recommend someone for a position, they get serious consideration. When I have concerns about someone's character or professionalism, people listen to that too. I picked up my phone again and started typing a text message, making sure she could see the screen. I'm texting my friend Jennifer Walsh right now. She's the HR director at MedTech Solutions. I believe that's where you work, isn't it? Jennifer and I are having lunch on Tuesday to discuss some placement opportunities, and I think your name might come up in conversation. Charlie's face went from pale to green. You wouldn't. Oh, but I would, I said quietly. You just spent the last 10 minutes telling my family that I'm pathetic, irrelevant, and have nothing valuable to offer the world. I think it's time you learned exactly what value looks like. I pressed send on the text message and set my phone face up on the table where everyone could see it. The response from Jennifer came within 30 seconds. Looking forward to Tuesday lunch. Always enjoy our chats about industry personnel. Charlie's face had drained of all color. She finally understood that her career, her entire professional future, could be influenced by the woman she'd just spent 20 minutes systematically destroying in front of the entire family. You see, Charlie, I continued, my voice still calm but carrying an edge that made everyone at the table sit up straighter, while you've been dismissing me as some irrelevant old woman clinging to the past, I've been quietly building something you clearly don't understand: real influence. I stood up and walked to my home office, returning with a folder I'd prepared months ago but never thought I'd need to use. Inside were printed copies of testimonials, award certificates, and business correspondence that told the real story of my professional life. Bolton Medical Consulting has placed over 800 healthcare professionals in positions throughout the Rocky Mountain region over the past 15 years. We're the preferred recruitment partner for 12 major health systems. When Presbyterian, St. Joseph needed a new chief of surgery, they called me. When National Jewish Health wanted to expand their research division, they called me. When Denver Health needed rapid placement of critical care specialists during COVID, they called me. I spread some of the documents on the table. Andrew leaned forward, reading them, with growing amazement. I could see him realizing that his mother's little business was actually a major player in Colorado's healthcare industry. Last year alone, my firm generated $2.8 million in placement fees. We have contracts worth over $12 million across our client base. The The small-town connections you mentioned include the CEOs of every major healthcare organization in a 3-state area. Charlie was now gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She was starting to understand the scope of what she'd walked into. But more importantly than the money, or the contracts, I continued, are the relationships. Dr. Williams and I have worked together on medical mission trips to Guatemala. Margaret Chen and I serve on the board of the Colorado Healthcare Foundation. These people aren't just professional contacts, they're friends who've seen my character tested under pressure for decades. My phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from Dr. Martinez at National Jewish Health, responding to a message I'd sent earlier about potential job openings. I held up the screen so Charlie could see his response. Amelia, always happy to discuss opportunities with your candidates. Your recommendations are gold standard. Now, I said, sitting back down and facing Charlie directly, let's talk about what happens next. You work for MedTech Solutions, which has consulting contracts with 3 of my major clients. Your company's reputation in the healthcare community depends heavily on maintaining professional relationships with organizations like Presbyterian, Street, Joseph, where your team handles their marketing campaigns for new service lines. Charlie's breathing was becoming shallow. She was finally connecting the dots between her personal attack on me and her professional vulnerability. I could make one phone call to Dr. Williams and mention that MedTech's marketing coordinator was disrespectful to a board member of the Healthcare United Foundation. I could casually tell Margaret Chen that someone from your company created an uncomfortable situation at a family gathering. I could let Dr. Martinez know that MedTech employs someone who publicly attacked my professional reputation. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Charlie, who'd spent the evening treating me like a powerless old woman, was now facing the reality that her career could be over with a few strategic conversations. But I'm not going to do that, I said, and I saw relief flood her face. Because unlike you, I don't use my influence to destroy people out of petty revenge. However, what happens next depends entirely on your choices. The lesson was about to begin. The silence that followed my revelation was profound. Charlie sat frozen in her chair, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. Andrew was staring at me with a mixture of awe and embarrassment, realizing how thoroughly he'd underestimated his own mother. Frank had a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd known exactly what I was capable of, and he was enjoying watching Charlie's world crumble around her assumptions. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and professional. Charlie, you're going to apologize to every person at this table. Not because I'm threatening your career, but because it's the right thing to do after the display you just put on in front of my grandchildren. Charlie's mouth opened, but only a whisper came out. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked, I interrupted. For 5 years, you've made assumptions about who I am, what I've accomplished, and what I'm worth based on your own limited perspective. You saw a woman who chose to host family dinners and bake cookies and decided that made me weak and irrelevant. I looked around the table at my family, Helen wiping tears from her eyes, Paul shaking his head in disbelief, Jake looking at me with newfound respect, and Emma and Lucas watching the adult drama with wide, confused eyes. But here's the lesson, Charlie. Real strength isn't about tearing other people down to build yourself up. Real power isn't about making others feel small to make yourself feel big. I've spent 30 years earning respect through competence, building relationships through integrity, and creating opportunities for others instead of destroying them. Andrew finally found his voice. Mom, I had no idea. I knew your business was successful, but I didn't realize the scope of what you'd built. That's because I don't need to announce my accomplishments at dinner parties or use my influence to intimidate people, I replied. I let my work speak for itself and treat people with the respect they deserve, regardless of their status or position. Charlie was crying now, ugly, desperate tears that had nothing to do with remorse and everything to do with fear about her professional future. Please, Amelia, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll change. I'll never disrespect you again. Just please don't ruin my career. Charlie, I told you I'm not going to destroy your career, but I am going to set some boundaries that should have been established years ago. Over the next hour, we had the conversation that should have happened when Charlie first joined our family. I explained that respect isn't optional in our home, that my grandchildren wouldn't be used as weapons in family disputes, and that if she couldn't treat Frank and me with basic courtesy, she wasn't welcome at family gatherings. Andrew, to his credit, finally stepped up. Charlie, my mother is right. I've watched you dismiss her accomplishments, mock her traditions, and treat our family like an inconvenience for years. I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing up for what's right, but I was wrong. The most important part of the conversation happened later, when the extended family had gone home and Charlie was putting the children down for their nap. Andrew and I talked honestly about his marriage, his role as a son, and his responsibility as a father to ensure his children grow up understanding what respect looks like. 6 months later, Charlie and I have what I'd call a cordial relationship. She's never warm, but she's respectful. More importantly, she's learned that underestimating people based on surface assumptions is a dangerous game, especially when those people have spent decades building real influence through genuine relationships and professional excellence. The best part? Emma and Lucas now see their grandmother, not just as the woman who makes great cookies, but as someone who built something meaningful while never forgetting what truly matters: family, integrity, and treating people with the respect they deserve. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in Christmas dinner and served with a side of humble pie.